Good morning. Welcome to the first webinar of the FY23 round of the Community One Stop for Growth. My name is Ashley Stolbud. I'm Undersecretary of Community Development for the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development. On behalf of the Healy Driscoll Administration and Economic Development Secretary Yvonne Howe, we want to thank you for joining today and for your interest in supporting and advancing economic growth throughout your state and in your communities. This series of webinars is designed to help you to understand the Community One Stop for Growth, both in terms of the technical aspects, as well as how your projects and economic development goals fit into the process. These webinars have been designed for anyone who is interested in learning about the process and how to access the state resources offered through the One Stop, whether you're a municipal official or a part of a private organization. If you are interested in learning how to access these state funds to support projects that will enhance your community and economic development goals in your municipality, you are in the right place. We will be recording all of our webinars and posting them onto the website. So here is just a roadmap of what we'll be doing today. I'm joined by our awesome team in the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, Juan Vega, who is the Assistant Secretary for Communities and Programs, and Pat Shannon, our Community One Stop Coordinator. Today, we are going to take a comprehensive look of the FY24 round of the One Stop. We will start with an overview of the One Stop, including the quick history, a review of grants provided in the first two rounds, and the programs within the One Stop. We'll then discuss some of the improvements that we've made. Thank you to a lot of your feedback. We've made these improvements since the last round, and then we'll dive into the details related to the development continuum, the expression of interest, and the full application. Then we'll end today's session by answering some frequently asked questions. We do invite you to submit questions through the Q&A function on your screen. The questions will be aggregated and responses will be posted in an FAQ document on our website, as we usually do. So here's some background on the One Stop. Over the years, we've heard from communities large and small about all the challenges accessing and even knowing about all the state resources available to help advance your goals for economic growth. Communities expressed that it was really difficult to keep track of all the different programs that were offered by all the different state agencies on different timelines. They never seemed to align well within the community's own plans. So this feedback led to HED to look at how we could improve access to all of our programs and streamline the grant process. The result was the Community One Stop for Growth. This is a portal that consolidates 12 community and economic development grant programs offered by HED, the Department of Housing and Community Development, and Mass Development into one single application and a collaborative review process. The One Stop streamlines the experience for the applicants and allows the state to better coordinate economic development programs and staff on engagement and grant making. The One Stop reorients the state from just a passive reviewer of funding requests to a real active partner in economic development strategy, priorities, and investment. So the One Stop presents a few key benefits, both for the applicants and us as state officials. So first, the expression of interest process provides an opportunity for the state to develop a relationship with applicants and provide guidance on potential project proposals before the full application is even opened. We'll discuss the EOI in more detail shortly, but it's optional, but it's a great opportunity, and I encourage all of our applicants to take advantage of this. Another great benefit of the One Stop is it saves both applicants time while expanding access to funding opportunities. We know that all of you and all of your organizations have limited staff resources, and it takes significant time to research and apply for multiple grant programs for one project. With the One Stop, applicants have access to the state programs most likely to support your community economic development project in one location with a single deadline and a single submission process. So even if your project isn't a fit for a program within the One Stop, we'll also try to point you in the direction of an appropriate program across state government that will hopefully work for your project through the referral process. Finally, the partnership between the state and applicants allow for a full view of communities' priority projects and provides one-stop partner agencies the ability to work together to help bring their goals to fruition. Now that we're in our third year of the one-stop, we're able to recognize projects that progressed year over year, and we can better coordinate the resources than the past would have likely viewed the project in a complete silo. We wanted to make it easier for you guys. Now, I just want to take a quick moment to look at the results for the first 2 rounds of the one-stop. As you can see, one-stop funding has been in very high demand. We received 360 applications and over $303 million worth of funding requests in the first round, and that shot up to 523 applications and $455 million in the second round. While we unfortunately can't give grants to all of the great projects submitted, as much as I would like to do that, we do our best to support as many as possible. So far, we've been able to make awards to 532, or about 60% of the applications we have received, and we've distributed a total of over $232 million in community and economic development funding all across the state. We are so proud of the success of the rural and small towns since we launched the one-stop. As you can see, we've seen a major uptick in the number of grants awarded in these communities, thanks in large part to the Rural and Small Town Development Fund, which launched with one-stop in FY22. But as you can see, we've more than doubled investments in our rural and small towns since launching the one-stop, and we are very, very proud of that accomplishment. So here's one of my favorite slides. It's a map of all of our investments. Regional diversity is extremely important to our team when considering granting new awards. We're really proud to say that so far we've provided grant awards to projects in over 205 communities in all corners of the Commonwealth. We're very excited to see this number grow, and we hope when we do this webinar next year, a lot of these little white towns will be filled in with color. So now I will hand it over to Juan, who will discuss the one-stop process. Over to you, Juan.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Ashley. And I do want to express appreciation as well for everyone that's joined the webinar and is interested in the community stop for growth. I'm going to kind of talk a little bit in an overview of the process that we've set up for the community one-stop. And we view this kind of in 4 main phases. The expression of interest comes at the beginning. We refer to this as the EOI process. And while, as Ashley mentioned, it is an optional step in this process, it is highly encouraged that communities take advantage, all applicants take advantage of this step. It's an opportunity for the prospective applicant to pitch their project ideas and have a team of program officials from the various agencies review those submissions and then provide written feedback as a way to help the applicant consider how they're going to approach their application and think about how to strengthen that application before completing it. The next step, certainly the full application itself. This is really the crux of the grant. This is where you actually make the grant request and you lay out all the details of the project. It is a streamlined application that allows applicants to submit comprehensive project proposals for funding consideration. Applicants complete certain sections depending on where their project falls on the development life cycle, which we'll spend some time talking about during this webinar. And the scale that we use is called the development continuum. And then rather applying to specific programs, what this process allows is for your project to be reviewed by potentially multiple programs that may find a fit to the project's funding needs. This collaborative review step is essentially an important part of our process, whereby the 3 organizations that are involved work together to review projects and applications that may overlap, making sure that all applications are being viewed for all potential funding sources in terms of appropriate programs. And the agencies have the opportunity as well to align these projects with their funding priorities. And then throughout both the EOI and the full application process, EOHD and the agency partners make targeted referrals to our other state grant programs. And so there may be cases where it may not be an exact fit to the purpose of the one-stop, but we may know of other state agencies that have programs that might be a good option. And especially in the cases where we see that the project may not be successful in the one-stop itself. Next, I just want to give a quick rundown or overview of all the one-stop programs. As mentioned, the one-stop is primarily managed by this cross-agency collaboration between the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, the Department of Housing and Community Development, and Mass Development. And at EOHED, we have Mass Works and Urban Agenda that are part of the one-stop. DHCD has Community Plan, Rural and Small Town Development Fund, Housing Choice, and the Mass Downtown Initiative. And Mass Development brings the Brownfields Program, Site Readiness, Underutilized Properties Program, Collaborative Workspaces, Commonwealth Place, and Real Estate Services. And so we want to talk a little bit during this webinar about what's new in FY24. As we did the previous year, we sent out a survey, and we thank all of you that may have participated in that survey, providing feedback about the process once you completed your full application. And based on those results, as well as a lot of debrief within the agency staff, we took the opportunity to make some improvements to the one-stop application and to the process. First, we focused on what we heard about the EOI. And so that revamped a bit. And some of you, if you have begun your EOI form, will see that it's been further streamlined. It's easier, hopefully, to complete format. And it includes, and then the feedback report that we're going to provide back to the prospective applicants are also going to be more robust. And so with additional application instructions, tips on how to be competitive, and implementation feedback in particular. We've also added to the full application a resource page. And this is essentially, we have a lot of questions throughout the process about certain components or where do folks find information. And so we've now kind of aggregated that and included it as part of the one-stop application. It contains critical information that applicants may need as they work through their application. It provides quick access to this information, and we will be discussing some of that during this webinar, including details about the development continuum, completing the full application, and then links to the program website. In terms of the full application itself, again, this is a work in progress. We look to, our ultimate goal is to create a streamlined experience for the applicants. There's been further consolidation of questions in section 2, the project information, as well as a major reduction in the number of questions being asked from the various sections. Applicants can now enter key project information such as the scope and the budget in that section 2, and then we eliminated the redundant questions in the following sections. We also now are able to get applicants to kind of really hone in on the one development continuum category per project. You'll now be limited to selecting a project category, a project type. We have found in the 2 initial rounds of this that it's very rare that projects actually will actually be straddling multiple development categories. And so limiting it to and get better focus in the application, we find is going to save the applicants from spending unnecessary time completing additional questions. And finally, the increased focus on the project scope. And this will hopefully the applicant really hone in on the project type and the project focus to ensure that the right programs are going to be reviewing your application. This will confirm that they're applying within the correct category and accessing the best funding source for their project. Additional items include, in the next slide, we have community activation, and placemaking is now the name of the first category in the continuum, which replaced what we had before, the community capacity building. A lot of feedback we got from users was that the way we described that was a bit confusing. And so hopefully this will be a way to represent the types of projects that will be funded in this development continuum category and clear up that confusion. We also have some changes to the special designation specific questions. Public organizations that are eligible for funding by the Housing Choice Program and or the Rural Small Town Development Fund will be given options to complete Form 3A, which we'll talk about some more, which are the designation additional questions. If they're proposing a project that might be eligible for funding by either of these programs. And although applicants now have a choice, opt into that, it is important to stress that this form must be completed for the application to be considered by those programs. And then in addition, or finally, we have in completing the full application, any public organization that's in a municipality designated MBTA community will be asked questions in Section 1 related to the community's compliance with Section 3A of Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A. And then in that vein, the MBTA community section. So as many of you know, there are two programs in the One-Stop MassWorks and the Housing Choice Grants that are linked to the MBTA community's legislation. And so the legislation, which was enacted as part of the Economic Bill in January 2021, provides for this new Section 3A of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, known as the Zoning Act. And it requires that an MBTA community shall have at least one zoning district of reasonable size in which multifamily housing is permitted as of right and to meet other criteria set forth in the statute. And so there are currently 177 Massachusetts municipalities that are named as MBTA communities that are subject to this new requirement. And so MBTA communities that are not in compliance will not be eligible for consideration for funding from the noted programs. And so this is a requirement we would add that applies to public entities, so essentially municipalities and any other type of public entities. It does not or will not impact or change the eligibility for any non-public entities applying to the one-stop. And essentially, as folks know and has been posted on the state community site, the current step is communities are being asked to submit a zoning district for compliance to DHED to receive the determination of compliance, to submit an action plan by the end of January, which was today, and receive the determination of interim compliance from DHED. And for more information, you can visit www.mass.gov/MBTA communities. Next up, I'm going to kind of focus a little bit on the development continuum itself. And this is a key component of the entire one-stop process. And so it's important that prospective applicants pay close attention to the continuum and how it affects the way they submit their application. And so throughout the presentation, you're going to continue hearing this reference to the development continuum. It's a critical component, as I've mentioned. And essentially, the way it's been set up, we've set this up to represent the life cycle of any major community development project, from its beginnings as far as initial community visioning to the far end for actual construction process. And so you should look at the development continuum as a guide. Our intent here is for communities or any applicant to think about their project in terms of how far along that continuum of the project be. And where that plays a key role is, as you know, we'll talk about some more, is all of the programs, or most of the programs in the one-stop are looking and are evaluating applications based on timelines, based on shovel readiness, based on preparedness. And so the extent to which you have built in some of the prerequisites to get your project further along, it matters that you understand where you might fall in that continuum to try to submit an application at the most opportune spot that will more likely get you a successful application for getting a grant. A lot of these projects fitted through the one-stop really should fit into one of the within one of the categories. And development continuum is broken up into two broad groups. On the left of the screen, we have the categories that we consider to be what we call preparing for growth. These are elements of the projects where you're perhaps just getting started with convening your stakeholder, or need to put some plans in place, or maybe have some developable site that needs some prep work before you're able to attract private investment. And so we see those as kind of the preliminary starter part of the continuum. On the right-hand side are where we would consider projects coming in that have already done a lot of that preparation, have development in sight, or are prepared to begin construction because they are, far along in their permitting, far along in design, et cetera. Projects tend to be more successful the more prepared they are on the far right. And next we have, these are to provide some more detail on the preparing for growth side. These are the types of projects, and again, we'll get more into that webinar, but to give you a sense, the first group of the categories related to the preparing for growth side, which we look at as grants that support activities and initial steps by community-based actors to attract and guide private investment in their community. Preparing for growth includes the community activation and placemaking, planning and zoning, as well as site preparation. And I'd like to take a moment to explain the chart you're looking at on the screen. And the bold categories are the actual continuum categories. And then we're broken down into what we refer to as project types. And you'll see there are two large sections. The top section usually tend to be such as early stage engagement under community activation. And then below that are the grants or project types that we consider as essentially implementation. So those are action grants. In planning and zoning, if you're just developing a community plan, a housing production plan, a master plan, et cetera, those are the front end of that category. Whereas if you're prepared to move forward, making zoning revisions, for example, those are the implementation side. And then site prep, similarly, pre-develop, getting the site ready, and then implementation is when you're ready to begin construction. And then the next few categories are the building, the infrastructure categories, which are the catalyzing specific projects. And similarly, we organize these in project types, think about where you might be in that timeline. If you're just developing and need some pre-development help, reconstruction help to do some design, feasibility, engineering, et cetera, you would come in those project types, versus if you are further along in all of that, ready for construction, then you would move in that direction. Now I will pass this to get into a deeper dive on the development continuum. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Juan. So my name is Pat Shannon. I'm the Community One-Stop Coordinator at HED. So I'm going to start today by taking a look at applicant eligibility as it relates to the development continuum. So all types of public entities are welcome and encouraged to submit an application through the one-stop. Municipalities and other public entities, such as redevelopment and housing authorities, may apply for funding through all 5 development continuum categories. Non-municipal public entities are also eligible to apply to the one-stop. However, any non-municipal applicant is encouraged to open a discussion with the municipal leadership to ensure coordination and local support. Non-public entities will only be considered for funding under those programs that allow for financial assistance to private entities. Nonprofit and community development corporations are eligible for funding through the community activation and placemaking, site preparation, and buildings categories. For-profit entities are only eligible to apply through the building category. Here you can see where each program within the one-stop falls on the development continuum. In the full application, applicants will see links to the guidelines for the programs associated with the sections of the application that they are completing. Please take time to review these guidelines prior to completing the application so that you are familiar with each program and understand the eligibility requirements and permissible funding activities. Those that participated in the last round may notice a couple of changes on this slide. Real estate services technical assistance is now accessed through both community activation and placemaking category for projects related to business improvement district formation and district improvement financing plans, as well as a site preparation category for municipal surplus property disposition planning projects. In addition, the Housing Choice Grant Program is now included in the site preparation and buildings categories, in addition to planning and zoning and infrastructure, where you would have seen it on this chart last year. So now we're going to take a look at each development continuum category in detail. First, we'll discuss community activation and placemaking. The grants in this category support projects and programs aimed at identifying and enhancing community assets. These assets can include the built environment, local businesses, or even community residents. The programs associated with community activation and placemaking are Mass Downtown Initiative, which we often call MDI, Commonwealth Places Program, Urban Agenda, and Real Estate Services Technical Assistance. Public organizations, nonprofits, and community development corporations may apply for funding through this category. However, only public organizations can receive funding through MDI and real estate services. Community activation and placemaking is comprised of the early stage engagement and action grants project types. Early stage engagement includes the technical assistance and preparation work needed before moving forward with an action grant. So within early stage engagement, there's two project focus areas. The first is consultant services for downtowns, which is associated with MDI. The second is community visioning for future placemaking, which is tied to Commonwealth Places and specifically the program's seed grants. Second project type, action grants, supports the implementation projects and includes implementing a community economic development program, which is tied to urban agenda, creating district support, which focuses on forming business improvement districts or creating district improvement financing plans under real estate services, technical assistance. And the last focus area is implementing locally driven placemaking, which is the implementation side of the Commonwealth Places program. Next up, we have planning and zoning. This category represents early stage projects that require a guiding plan, study, assessment of community needs, or work to revise zoning within the community. These are planning grants and they must produce a planning document. The programs associated with this category are the Community Planning Grants Program, Housing Choice Grant Program, and Rural and Small Town Development Fund. Planning and zoning is only open to public entities. So there's the two project types in planning and zoning are community plan and zoning revision. So community plan is comprised of master plans, neighborhood plans, downtown plans, urban renewal plans, housing production plans, regional plans, corridor plans, or really any other type of community plan that will result in a planning document. The second project type, zoning revision, includes zoning to comply with Section 3A of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, so the MBTA community law, comprehensive zoning review and revision, or other kind of community zoning revisions. Again, every project focus listed here is tied to Community Planning Grants Program and could also be considered by Housing Choice Grant Program or the Rural and Small Town Development Fund for eligible applicants. Here, the site preparation category includes planning and implementation grants focus on projects working to progress a key site toward development. Projects in this category may not necessarily have a final developer or end use identified yet. However, projects must have an actual site identified. The programs associated with this category are the Site Readiness Program, Brownfield Redevelopment Fund, Real Estate Services Technical Assistance, Housing Choice Grant Program, and Rural and Small Town Development Fund. This category is available to public organizations, nonprofits, and community development corporations. However, nonprofits and CDCs are only eligible for funding by the Site Readiness Program. The first project type in this category is site pre-development, which includes the steps needed to prepare for the construction activities within site work implementation. There's 3 project focus areas within site pre-development. First, preparing for site improvement construction, which is associated with the Site Readiness Program and can include site due diligence, site plan design, market study, civil engineering, and permitting work. Second, brownfield site assessment is associated with the Brownfields Redevelopment Fund. And finally, preparing for municipal surplus property disposition, which, as we already discussed, is associated with the Real Estate Services Technical Assistance. Second project type is site work implementation and includes site improvement construction, which is mainly tied to the Site Readiness Program and can include demolition, tasks related to site acquisition, and construction of site-related upgrades. The second project focus is brownfields remediation, which again is tied to the Brownfields Redevelopment Fund. The Housing Choice Grant Program and Rural and Small Town Development Fund may consider applications submitted by an eligible applicant for all project areas or all project focus areas in this category other than brownfields assessment and brownfields remediation. Next up, the building category. This includes pre-development and implementation grants to support vertical construction. Funding in this category is intended for projects that are essential to the occupancy of a blighted or underutilized property, as well as those that support the creation of new co-working space. It's important to note that funding in this category is limited to projects that have a strong public purpose and benefit. New this year, we have also included a path for public entities in housing choice communities and or rural and small towns to access funds for public facility and municipally supported housing construction or feasibility studies. Programs associated within the buildings category are the Underutilized Properties Program, Collaborative Workspace Program, Rural and Small Town Development Fund, and Housing Choice Grant Program. All entities, including for-profits, are eligible to apply through this category. However, as noted, municipal building construction funds are limited to housing choice and rural and small town eligible public entities. The building category is divided into building pre-development and building construction project types. Building pre-development includes building rehabilitation feasibility study, which is associated with the Underutilized Properties Program and can include building condition studies, development feasibility studies, code compliance, and architectural or engineering plans. Collaborative Workspace feasibility pre-development is the next one, which is funded through Collaborative Workspace Program. And finally, municipal building construction feasibility studies, which, as mentioned, is only funded through Housing Choice Grant Program and the Rural and Small Town Development Fund, and can be used for feasibility studies related to public facility construction or municipally supported housing or mixed use construction. The building construction project type includes the implementation side of all of the project focus areas within the pre-development project type. So rehabilitation of a blighted or underutilized property, again, is associated with the Underutilized Properties Program and can be used for code compliance, building accessibility improvements, building stabilization, shell repair, and interior demolition or remediation. Collaborative Workspace fit out, again, is funded through Collaborative Workspace Program, and municipal building construction, again, is funded through the Housing Choice Grant Program and the Rural and Small Town Development Fund. So the final development continuum category is infrastructure. The infrastructure category provides funding for improvements to public infrastructure that leverages and supports private investment in the community. Investments are focused on projects that require this infrastructure to allow for new growth or to address road safety issues. This category is only accessible to public entities and is associated with the Mass Works Infrastructure Program, Housing Choice Grant Program, and Rural and Small Town Development Fund. Similar to buildings, this category is comprised of infrastructure pre-development and infrastructure construction project types. Infrastructure pre-development only has one project focus, and that is pre-construction design engineering documents. These grants are intended for the design and engineering work required to prepare for a major capital infrastructure project. A private developer does not necessarily need to be identified for pre-development projects, but the goal is that this work will eventually lead to private investment. Infrastructure construction is made up of two focus areas. First, public infrastructure to support growth, and the second is small town road improvements to enhance public safety, which some of you may know by its kind of former name, which is STRAP. The first project focus, public infrastructure to support growth, includes the construction of roadways and streetscapes, water and sewer infrastructure, public utility improvements, and bridge or culvert construction. These projects generally should have a private developer identified and should leverage private investment in order to be competitive for MassWorks funding. The Housing Choice Grant Program Enrolled Small Town Development Fund may consider smaller projects within each program's funding limits that do not have associated private development identified. The Small Town Road Improvement to Enhance Public Safety project focus is for grants that are available to towns with a population of 7,000 or less to address roadway safety concerns, including dangerous road conditions and specific threats such as the imminent collapse of a culvert. So now I'm going to hand it back to Juan to discuss the one-stop process.
Great, thank you, Pat. So here we kind of almost as a recap, want to, with all the information we provided, want to give you kind of a visual of the steps of the phases of the process. The expression of interest, as has been mentioned, is optional step that starts the process. There'll be review and feedback. At that stage, there's a potential referrals to other programs based on the information you provide in the EOI. That then leads to the full application, which is which has all the core questions related to the Continuum categories, which then moves into the collaborative review, where the three agencies and all of its partners do the evaluations, and then award decisions are made. Grants that are awarded will receive information about the award, and those that are not awarded will be offered an opportunity for a debrief to discuss what elements of the project could be or application could be strengthened in the future. In terms of a timeline for all of this, the expression of interest phase is happening now. We launched that in December of 2022. It'll run through through March 17th. And the application, which is also now open, and at this time, applicants can begin working on the applications. However, we won't be able to formally submit them until starting May 1st. The submission period starts May 1st and ends on June 2nd. The deadline to submit the full application is 11:59 p.m. on June 2nd. And then following the submission deadline, the collaborative review process begins, and will continue through the summer. We anticipate being able to make grant announcements and notifications in the fall of 2023, similar to last year. And I'll just quickly review the expression of interest. As has been mentioned, it is an optional but highly encouraged and recommended step. It's a form that allows applicants to pitch their ideas before starting on the full application. The feedback report is also where applicants will often receive referrals to programs when appropriate. And even if the project might not be an exact fit to one of the programs in the one-stop, we certainly will try to point the applicant in the right direction as far as state funding. To reiterate, the EOI process is open now. We are accepting and reviewing the EOIs on a rolling basis as they come in. The deadline is March 17th. However, for applicants that are interested in submitting up to 5 project ideas, the deadline for that is February 3rd. And you'll be able to do up to 5 project ideas. Then after that, you can continue submitting an EOI, but it'll be limited to up to 2 projects. And then the form itself, this is just to give you a visual of the IGX system where the applications, both for the EOI and the full application reside. And what we just want to show here is just we've simplified the expression of interest process. It's just 2 sections. In section 1, you're going to be identifying the applicant and the applicant type to help the review team understand the type of organization and the relation in terms of what it may be eligible for within the one-stop. There's questions about staff capacity and your goals to help the reviewers understand what the applicant is trying to accomplish. And the added benefit of completing the EOI is that the information you enter in this section 1, if you then choose to start a full application, that information will transfer over. And then the next slide, section 2 is really where the applicant will provide the information about the project themselves, the proposed projects. And for each of the projects, it's a very short form. We're asking for a brief description, project goals, an estimate of what the applicant thinks you'll be asking for in terms of a grant, the description of what you intend to use that funding for, and the timeline of the project. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Pat to talk to us about the full application.
All right. So the full application is the vehicle that applicants will use to request grant funds. As Juan noted, it's open now in the IGX system so that you can start working on your applications, and then we'll start accepting submissions beginning May 1st with a final deadline of 11:59 p.m. On June 2nd. There's no limit to the number of applications that any organization can submit, but it is important to remember that you must submit a separate application for each project that you would like to be considered for funding. Today, we'll be providing a high-level overview of the structure of the full application, but I encourage everyone to join on Thursday for webinar 2, where we'll take a deep dive into the application and how an applicant would complete the application with a few different project scenarios. After the June 2nd deadline, we'll begin the collaborative review process. All applications are reviewed by program staff to determine which programs are best suited for the project to help the project achieve its goals. The initial review will include a screening based on statutory and regulatory eligibility requirements and program guidelines. All applications will then be evaluated based on some core criteria, including whether the project has an achievable scope, the ability of the applicant to execute the project having an achievable timeline and reasonable budget, and the outcomes and impact and progress to date. And as Juan mentioned, as was the case in the first 2 rounds, we expect that decisions will be sent in the fall of 2023. So now we're going to take a look inside the application in IGX. So when you log in and open an application, you'll see a blue menu on the left side of the screen and kind of a section called Forms. This is how you'll navigate through the different sections of the application. So first, we just want to highlight one-stop resources. Juan touched on this earlier, but the one-stop resources is a new component of the one-stop. We want to make sure that applicants had quick and easy access to all the information they may need when filling out their application. So when you're in there, you can always click back to one-stop resources to find guidance related to the structure of the full application, applicant eligibility, the development continuum, and links to all program websites. So now we'll start in the actual application. So Form 1 on the left side contains Section 1, which is applicant information and background. Just like the EOI, this contains just general information about the organization, including contact information. And as Juan noted, if you complete an EOI, a lot of the information in Section 1 will be pre-filled based on what you put in your EOI. There are a few additional questions in Section 1 of the full application that aren't in the EOI. So first off, applicants will be asked here whether they're submitting a joint application. And just to clarify, by joint application, we mean an actual formal agreement with another entity for the allocation of the funds if awarded a grant, as opposed to just an informal project partner that's common on most projects. Here, public or I'm sorry, here, public organizations in an MBTA community will also be asked several additional questions related to the status of compliance at the time of application. Next up on Form 2, this is home to Section 2, which is project information. This is where applicants will enter general project information, and it's made up of the questions that all programs reviewing the application will need to know, regardless of the project type, such as name, project description, timeline, and anticipated outcomes. We've expanded Project 2 to include important information that's previously kind of dispersed throughout the rest of the application, including the project scope and budget. Section 2 contains the most important question in the entire application, and that's question 2.3. This is where applicants will be asked to indicate the development continuum category that the project falls within, and they'll also indicate the project type and project focus. The selection made in this question will drive the questions that the applicant will answer throughout the rest of the application, and in large part will determine which programs end up reviewing the application. Again, we'll be discussing question 2.3 and kind of the different scenarios surrounding this question in much greater depth in webinar 2. Applicants proposing a site preparation, building, or infrastructure project will also be asked additional questions specific to the project's site that applicants either submitting community activation placemaking or planning and zoning project will not be asked. And finally, at the end of the section, public organizations within a housing choice or rural and small town community that are proposing a project that's eligible for funding by either the Housing Choice Grant Program or Rural Small Town Development Fund will be asked whether they want to complete Form 3A special designation questions, which we'll be talking about in a moment. It's an option for the applicants to complete this form, but the form is required in order to be considered by either program. So next up, Form 3 contains the development continuum questions. This form will be populated with questions based on the selection made in question 2.3. So depending on the development continuum category selected in that question, applicants will see one of either Section 3, community activation and placemaking, Section 4, planning and zoning, Section 5, site preparation, Section 6, buildings, or Section 7, infrastructure. The question within each development continuum are specific to the programs that will be reviewing the application, and there may be some variation based on the project type and focus selected in 2.3. So for example, if you're applying submitting a buildings project, you'll see different questions if you're submitting a project to fix up a underutilized property compared to if you're submitting a project for a collaborative workspace. I'd like to note that each program has a shortened sample of the full application template on their websites, showing only the questions that applicants that select their kind of associated project focus areas can expect to see. So if you know that there's a particular program that you're interested in pursuing funding through, definitely check out their website and take a look at that sample template. So Form 3A, this contains Section 8, the special designation, additional questions, which we mentioned before. So to get here, applicants will need to indicate their desire to complete this form in Section 2, and the form's required to be considered for funding by Housing Choice Grant Program or Rural and Small Town Development Fund. Housing Choice communities that elect to answer this question will see questions specific to the Housing Choice Grant Program, and rural and small town communities will see questions specific to the Rural and Small Town Development Fund. There are cases where eligible applicants may be able to answer both sets of questions. Kind of wrapping up, we have Form 4, which has the certification of application submission authority, and this is a signature page basically stating that the applicant is authorized to submit the application on behalf of the organization, and it must be completed by either the chief executive or an authorized official. And finally, Form 5 has Section 10, which is for other optional attachments. This is basically just an area where you can add any attachments that you may have to support your project that were not requested throughout the application. Generally, these attachments won't be scored or considered during the review. And you do not need to add an attachment or complete this page in order to submit the application. With that, I'm going to send it back to Juan.
Great, thank you, Pat. And at this time, we kind of want to switch a little bit to address some questions. And thank you to everybody. We see a lot of activity of questions coming in. And as Ashley mentioned at the beginning, we will be reviewing these and aggregating them and posting them in a frequently asked questions document on the website. But we did want to kind of take the last few minutes to address some general questions that we get. And so first off, we do get the question, if we didn't submit an EOI, can I still submit a full application? And the answer is absolutely yes. The expression of interest is an optional step. It does not, if you miss the deadline for that or choose not to participate in that, that does not affect the ability for you to submit a full application. I will add that the expression of interest is to put forth some ideas and get some feedback. It does not obligate the applicant to submit those ideas for a full application. And in fact, the feedback may be that it might be too early or perhaps a different source. Conversely, if you submit projects in your EOI and then reconvene, with the local leadership and decide you're not going to pursue that project, but you have another idea, there's nothing to preclude you from submitting a full application for any project, regardless of whether it was included in an EOI. The EOI process is a collaborative process where we're trying to provide you some feedback ahead of time for the full app, but it doesn't lock the applicant in one way or the other. We also get a lot of questions about funding for multiple projects within the single application. And in that sense, hopefully, as we've described, the answer is no. We don't anticipate that there's a lot of projects that will actually be eligible for multiple projects that will be able to fit within the same development continuum. We invite the applicants to consider the continuum, consider the project where it fits, and put forth that one project for a single application. However, there is no limit to the number of applications you can submit. You can submit multiple projects to different parts of the continuum. What you will see in the EOI feedback, and we certainly mentioned to applicants, be mindful that if you have similar projects, you have, let's say, multiple infrastructure projects, to consider whether you want to submit multiple infrastructure applications in the same round. Ultimately, the projects will be competing against each other. So that's something that we ask communities to be strategic and think about. As far as when will I know if I'm receiving an award, we do anticipate being able to complete the reviews in the summer and in early fall begin doing notifications as we have done in the past. Let's see, we're looking at a few of the questions that we have time for maybe a handful of questions that are coming in through the Q&A. How many project ideas can we have a submit? Presumably this is to the EOI. As was mentioned, up until February 3rd, any applicant can submit up to 5 project ideas and get feedback for all 5. After that date, you can still submit an expression of interest. It'll just be limited to the 2 project ideas. And part of that, the reasoning there is to give time to the review team, time to review all of the EOIs and be able to give you feedback in time for you to complete a full application. As far as accessing, the question is, how do you access the EOI in the portal? We'll just note in the portal itself, when you're logged in, once you have a user account, on the My Opportunities, usually it's on the left, on the right-hand panel called My Opportunities, you'll see the option to create an expression of interest. And now you also have the option to create a full application. We'll be posting at the end here the website where you'll be able to find the link to get to IGX. Let's see, we have a question. Are nonprofits such as a resident-owned manufacturing housing community eligible for funding for drinking water and waste water infrastructure projects? Generally speaking, no. The public infrastructure dollars that are available through the One Stop are only available to public entities. That said, it probably will be important to submit this project idea through the expression of interest process and give the multiple agency leaders an opportunity to think about, understand what type of organization you are, what do you own the infrastructure that you're trying to improve, et cetera, in order to be able to provide more direct feedback on that. And there are cases we've seen where there are organizations in the community partner up with the municipality. It just depends on the location and also whether or not the community you're talking about might be eligible for rural and small development fund support. And so all those are all the variables. And so an expression of interest is a way for you to get that information to us, for us to be able to give you a much more direct answer. Let's see, if we're requesting funds for repairs to our current facilities, do we have to own the building, or is there enough to be leasing the facility? So in this case, it again depends. Some of the projects, if you're looking, if you're focusing your request to the underutilized properties program, yes, there is a requirement that you own the building there. A program such as collaborative workspace, where you're making improvements to a site, there is an opportunity to be either to demonstrate that you own the site or that you have a lease. Let's see, is a nonprofit also a public entity? So no, these are kind of the legal setup of these organizations. You're either a public entity by definition, or you're set up as a nonprofit, which in this case is categorized as a private entity for purposes of eligibility. Great. So we'll pause there. Like I said, we'll look at, thank you for all the questions. I see a lot of great questions in there. We will do our best to get that information onto our website. And then just to finalize future webinars, we have the next one coming up on February 2nd. We'll get really do a deep dive into the actual application itself. And then there'll be a technology webinar to walk through how to access IGX and start your applications, et cetera. There'll be a recording that'll be posted on the website on February 7th. www.mass.gov/onestop is where you would go to get all the updated information. And then also /MBTA communities for those communities that need more information about compliance with the new law. With that, we thank you very much for your participation in today's webinar.